Welcome everybody to April. Is it April? It is April. April's edition of the Limerick.net-Azure user group. We're pleased to have Maik presenting on Bicep. Bicep, the new domain-specific deployment language from Microsoft tonight. So I'm looking forward to this because I'm doing a lot with Bicep in my personal time and personal learning, so I'm looking forward to what Maik has to tell us tonight. As I said, the session will be recorded for anybody that couldn't make it, and it'll be posted on YouTube over the coming day. So I'm just going to stop my share, and we'll just ask Maik just to take over. If anybody is on their mic, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself at this point, just so we can keep the video nice and quiet while Maik's presenting. Thanks all. Thank you, Maik.
Yeah. Let me just get my PowerPoint rolling. Sure. Yes. So everyone should be able to see my PowerPoint slides at this moment.
Yep, looks good.
Yeah. Okay, great. So let's get started. And Azure Infrastructure as Code with Azure Bicep. First, I have a couple of questions for the attendees. So who already knew about Bicep before joining this session? Please throw your hand in Teams. That's the easiest for the people that, yeah, almost everyone, I think. Who has done already some things with Bicep? Okay, that's cool.
So not much in production as yet, as I say, a bit of personal play stuff.
Okay, let's get rolling then. Yeah, so first of all, let me shortly introduce myself. Maik van der Graag. I currently work as a CTO at a company called 350 in the Netherlands. We are a small specialized consultancy company, mainly doing Microsoft stuff. So basically all the work we do are Microsoft related. Besides that, I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, and I'm the founder of the Dutch Cloud Meetup, basically a cloud meetup group like you guys have already here, but then in the Netherlands with some default sponsors as well. Look at Bicep and what Bicep is. Bicep is a domain-specific language, and other domain-specific language there are, for example, HTML, CSS. There are all languages that are specific for doing one action and talking to one specific application. And it's basically a transparent abstraction over ARM. So what you can see here in the image as well is that in the Azure platform, you have the Azure Resource Manager that basically accepts ARM templates by default for doing deployment management on Azure resources. What they have done with Bicep, they have created a language that basically constructs or builds the ARM templates. That's basically what it does. So it's really easy. Then look at how to get started. Basically, is just install the tooling. There are some different ways, so you can use Windows with the Chocolati install. You can do it on Linux, basically manual install, or do a cross-platform installation via the Azure CLI. So if you have the newest version of the Azure CLI, you can just do an AC Bicep install or an AC Bicep upgrade to do your upgrading as well for the command line interface. And let's then get over to the Bicep tooling itself. So basically, what do you do with the Bicep tooling? The Bicep tooling itself is not much. So basically, you have two main commands. That's basically the build action and the decompile action. So basically, the build action, you supply it with a Bicep file, and it will build and construct your ARM template based on that file. Or you use the decompile function. And if you use the decompile function, you supply it with an ARM template, and the engine will build you a Bicep file. Quick and easy. Next to that, if you have the Bicep tooling, there's also a specific integration in the Azure CLI and the Azure PowerShell. Basically, you have to have the newest versions for both actions, of course, but the integration there is that with the Azure CLI, you can use the build command directly from the CLI. you also use the install action on the CLI itself, but you can also directly deploy, for example, your Bicep file to Azure. So normally what you have done with the new Azure Resource Group deployment PowerShell action, you supply it with a JSON file, but you can also supply it with a Bicep file directly. And the tooling itself in the backend will construct the ARM templates for you. So you don't have to do the build actions yourself. No, the comments itself will do the action for you. And basically what it does in the background, it just does the Bicep build for you and then deploys the JSON file to Azure. So let me just first show you some couple of things regarding the Bicep tooling. So let me stop this sharing and let me start sharing. Let me just share my screen one. Yeah, so basically all I do, my work is from Visual Studio Code. So if you just look at the tooling itself, we have Bicep. You can do the -help and see basically all comments regarding Bicep and how to run Bicep itself. So building an ARM template is really easy. So what you can see here, so if we, for example, take the 001, we will later on we will go deeper into how we build those Bicep files. Is you can see here that we have a sampled Bicep file that constructs an Azure App Service together with application insights and log analytics interface. So just to construct the ARM template out of it, we just do a Bicep build. That's one, and then the Bicep file. Oh, built. Okay, nice way to do your demos. Bicep build, you maybe see some warnings. That's basically because of type configurations that are not completely configured on the ARM schemas. So what you can see here is that Bicep uses the schemas of the API to construct things. And you can see with certain types, there are still some warnings in there that they do not have the complete and correct information. You can also see that warning, for example, on the Bicep file itself. But just in a few seconds, we just generated the complete ARM template for that Bicep file so that you can reuse it during your deployments and everything. So that's just the tooling itself. So if we then go to the language itself and look at how the Bicep file itself is constructed, let me just do that and then share my presentation again. Basically, the Bicep file itself has a similar structure as your normal ARM template. So you all know, if you know ARM, you have the parameter section, you have the variable section, you have the resource section, and you have the output section. All based on the same structure. So if you look at Bicep, you also have the parameters. So you can see here a few examples of parameters with different types as well. You have the variables, so meaning that you construct different variables, combine two different parameters, for example. You have the resources for basically deploying your resources. You have modules. That's basically for reusing specific generic sets of code. You will go deeper into that later on. And you have the output section that basically generates the outputs in your ARM template. So that will be generally the output, what you want to put out in your files. So then if we then dig a little bit deeper into the parameters, you have some default attributes that you can use in those parameters. So you can do the default value, for example, that you also have in ARM just by typing is and then basically what it is. In this example, you see that we just get the location of the resource group we are already deploying to. You have the allowed values. You also have the secure values. You have the minimal length, max length for an array. It can even be for a string, for example. You have a description that will just go into the description in the ARM template. And you have a min and max value, meaning that you can specify min and max value for your integers. And you can also supply some metadata. the metadata attribute itself. You can supply it with all the information you want regarding a parameter. So you can also supply an author. You can supply a description. That's basically of your choosing. So you can choose yourself what you want to supply there. Then we have a different thing, and that's basically the scopes. And that's basically a real important thing in Bicep as well. And me starting into this and looking at how I have done things with ARM, this has been much easier for me doing in Bicep. Basically, with the scopes, you can specify where you want to deploy your template. So do you want to deploy it at a scope of the tenant? So basically, maybe deploying to different subscriptions in your tenant. So then you will have to choose a target scope tenant, and that's basically done on the complete file. So you specify it at the top of the file. You specify, okay, for this template, I want to deploy to my tenant. And of course, you also have the management group, the target scope subscription, and of course, that's basically the default one, and that's the resource group scope where you just deploy to a resource group. That's the most default one. These scopes can also be applied on different sections within your Bicep file. So you have the scope section on your resource itself, and that's basically tied to can be tied to a different resource in the Bicep file as well. So as you can see in the example, the log resource has the scope storage ACC, and basically the storage ACC is my storage account. So basically this section deploys a cannot delete log on my storage account just by using the scope section. You also have the modules. So for example, you can specify on a module on which subscription or on which resource group you want to deploy it. So what you can see here is we use the resource group function, and we normally supply it with a subscription and a name. So you can deploy this module to a specific subscription or a specific resource group during your deployment. And that's basically all based on the target scope you use on the top. We will go, I have a few demos prepared already for this session, so we will just go later on, go through a few demos to really see how that works and how you can use that scoping to do your JSON files as well. So then we also have Bicep modules, and that's basically one of the most easiest things I think within Bicep, and it will give you a lot of advantages in the future as well. Working with Bicep is that you have a concept of modules, and basically those modules itself are pieces of code that you can reuse in a different situation. So for example, for project X, you develop a web application with insights. For project I, you develop VMs, and if you do that in a module way, you can reuse those components within other different Bicep files. So in your main Bicep file, you just reference, like the nested template section, you just reference a different module, and you give it the correct parameters, and then you deploy it to your specific environment. So these are basically contracts to other files. You have the parameters, of course. You also have the outputs of those section, and there are just simple Bicep files. So there's nothing specific about it. It is just another Bicep file that you reference as a module. If you use those modules in your Bicep file and you generate an ARM template, it just generates a nested deployment. So doing those modules just generates a nested deployment within your ARM template, and I will show you one during the demonstration. And basically, we are at the demonstration part at this moment. So are there any questions regarding the structure and the options you have? Nope. Okay. Then just let's continue. So let me stop sharing this.
Couple typing in the chat there.
Okay. Just wait then.
Okay, if you're not seeing the chat, I'll read this for you. Elcon, hopefully I got your name right there, asks how Azure policies could be defined in Bicep.
Not sure there. We can look at it later on. Not done policies with Bicep at this moment, so I'm not sure there. I can look it up for you if you want, and I will get back to you on that.
Sounds good.
Any other questions?
Nothing in the chat.
Okay, then let's just continue. So to show you how simple it is basically to create a Bicep file, one other thing is really important. If you like doing your work within Visual Studio Code, you also have to install the Bicep extension. What you can see here is I have a Bicep extension installed, and that really makes it really easy to create your Bicep files with type ahead functionality just to get started. So if we look, for example, if you just create a new file, just demo.bicep, I have a Bicep file, and then it's really easy to get started. So just defining a parameter, and then you just define a type, for example. Let's just do the string. Then we can also do a parameter too. Quickly, just do an array, for example, and we can give this, for example, the research group. You can see that basically everything is already in the type ahead functionality. So that's really easy as well to just construct your parameters. It's basically the same for variables. That completely works the same. So if I just I can just concatenate, for example, just do parameter 1. It's quite easy to get this up and rolling. And then basically you would say the hard part is just defining a resource. That's basically also parameter applying in ARM is very easy. You just need to know how to do it. And then basically doing a resource is very hard. But basically that's where the extension of Visual Studio Code comes in. So you define the resource. So let's call it demo resource. And then what you see here basically is all the schemas that are available at this moment. So I can choose for all kind of schemas. You also see the versions supplied to it at the backend. So if you, for example, just type storage, I get a storage account, and I just got a question about policies, policy insight, policy definitions, set policy definitions. So there's already a lot of in here. And basically what the easy part is if I just type a storage, let me just take the new one, and I type is, and then an object definement. What you see right away is that you get the red lines. That's basically also because it sees that you are trying to create a storage account, but it also defines directly, okay, you are creating a storage account, but you normally don't know creating your ARMs what the required properties are for a resource. This directly gives you the required properties for that resource. So what you can see here is that we need to specify a name. Let me just do demo resource. Then we need to specify location. So let me choose parameter 1 for that, because we already have it. So we also have to kind. So which kinds do we have? I don't know. Normally, maybe in ARM you just Google around. Visual Studio Code knows everything basically. And I have to have an SKU as well. And then, for example, you want to specify tags. You can also specify tags. And you have to your values. So this is basically how easy it is to just construct and start with your ARM templates. Same for the output. So for example, I just specify an output. And the nice and easy thing now is that you do not have to type in the string a path to the specific properties you want to share in your output. So I specify a name for my output. And then you already see that I have a demo resource. That's basically my resource I'm deploying. I can just specify the values I want. So if I want to have a specific property, just go down basically to all properties there are on the storage account. You just have to search for it and you can use it during your deployment as well. So let me just set the ID. That's basically how easy it is to specify everything and just get started with your ARM templates. Especially as all the properties you have are specified in the ARM schemas. So the tooling retrieves those properties for you and really helps you getting everything up and rolling. So let me just go over to the module section. Basically the module section I've created in here, I've just prepared some default modules in here as well already for us to use. So what you can see here is that I've created a module and I've also done some comments in here as well. You can just specify comments in your Bicep files. So basically this is just a simple module that I can reuse within different components. So you can see here that I have a module for a resource storage account and its outputs basically the storage account.id. So to use this module, it's very easy as well. So let me just and then I have to specify the folder and then the storage account. Basically what it does as well, it also searches for the parameters. So by default, a module should always have a name. That's just required for the deployment. Basically what happens is that what I showed you in the slide is that from a module we get a nested deployment in ARM. A nested deployment in ARM requires a name. So basically the name we specify here will be the nested deployment name. Nested deploy in ARM. Just then go further, we can specify depends on. So we can implicitly define which dependencies we have within the Bicep file, but by default, just like in ARM, it will search on the dependencies and will generate the dependencies correctly for you. But if you need to specify dependencies, you can just do a depends on and specify, for example, the dependency yourself. Just do the resource itself. So if we choose the parameters, you can also see that there are parameters specified on top of my module. So I need to have an account name. And I also need a location. Oh, it's so let me just do the outputs. So we still have the outputs. It should be of type string, and I can also get the outputs of my module just by typing it. So this really makes it really easy to generate the Bicep file. So if you now also do a Bicep build demo Bicep, you will get a JSON file, and then we can look at the sample JSON file as well. Yeah. That's funny. That's always nice when doing demos. Nope. Ah, okay. My bad. If you don't save a file, you just generate empty JSON files. Okay, there it is. So what you can see here as well is that the parameters get defined as well with the same default values. We also have the variables. We have the resources in here as well. And you can also see that we have a resource in here that's basically a nested deployment. So what you see here as well, that the required name we specified is a nested deploy. So it is really applies as well as your nested deployment as well. And here you have your storage account that gets deployed with a specific output, and then the specific output of our ARM template as well. So you can build up really fun things with this, especially with the module section. So if we look, for example, at the Azure App Service Bicep, this is basically a Bicep file that just generates an Azure App Service, a logic app, and also specifies log analytics workspace on it. That's all done in a module. So for example, if you are just using, just starting up a new project that uses an app service, you normally have just some default configurations that you need to do on your app services. So you want to have HTTPS only on true, you have the Mint TLS version, you want to have specific logging settings, you want to have application insights attached to it as well. Maybe you also want to have log analytics. If you specify those things in a module, it's really easy for you to just pick that module and start up a new Bicep file using that module. As you can see here as well, it's really simple just to create an app service as well. Basically, the app service itself is just referenced by using the resource itself and doing the ID for the server farm ID, really making it easy for you to combine those and set those as well. Yeah. Now, for example, you also have the outputs here. This is still, for me, one of the biggest advantages of using Bicep is that you just can type ahead, do the properties, and get the administration key. I always find it really hard in ARM to just get that correct string in there, to get the correct values in there, and maybe get the correct values in your application settings as well. But let's do just the fun things and also look at the looping functionality that there's in Bicep. That's basically one of the major things they just released when going public during an Ignite as well. And for that module section, what I've created, I have two modules. So I have a Linux VM module where I just have some simple things for a Linux VM that we can use to just build and construct a VM. You can see that the VM template itself has a lot of additional things that you need to set up as well. So that's why the Bicep file itself is a lot larger. And we also have a VNet.bicep file, basically specifying a VNet with default configurations. So if you look at, that's 005. So basically what this Bicep file does, it deploys a VM in a VNet, in a predefined VNet, and we define how much VMs we want to get in there. So with a lot of managed services environments we work with, for clients, we have a specified VNet, and then a client comes in, okay, I want to have 5 VMs, all of the same size in that VNet, pre-configured. Just do it. Make it quick and easy. So this is one just to demonstrate how easy it is. So we have, for example, we have one module, a module that connects to the VNet Bicep file. So this module just deploys the VNet how we want it. And then we have a reference to our VM Bicep file, our Linux VM Bicep file. You can see here is that we supply it with the parameters it needs. So you can also see here is that we reference the VNet, so that we get the correct VNet in the VM ARM template to really make it connect to that VNet as well. But what you can also see is that we have a for loop in here. So for each item in the parameter VM items, we will run this module, meaning that depending on how much VMs I specify in this array, it will just deploy out the VMs in the ARM template to really make sure that I have the VMs that I need. You can also see here that the VM items just contains the VM name that we want to get. So we have supplied it there. So if you look at, for example, the deployment section itself, and that's 005. So you can see here that we just do a Bicep build. So let me just start this one. Hope I'm still connected. Yep. So we do a Bicep build, and you can see that we have a JSON file here. JSON file contains all the parameters, all the resources itself. So as you can see here as well, we are also deploying it in 2 different resource groups. So we have separation of concerns for our VNet and also for our VMs. So that's also specified in the Bicep file. And then we have basically the copy syntax that you need for VMs to do loops in ARM. And that will just copy the templates and just deploy the section. So we can also really run this. Oh, let me get the PS1 version. So basically we just have a script. So what you can see here as well, I've specified the parameter VM items and I just deploy 3 VMs. So basically I generated the script, generated the ARM template. You can see here that I'm just referencing that ARM template and I can just, so see I'm still connected to Azure. I think I am, because it's, and if you just look at the Azure environment I have, no, not doing anything at this moment. Okay, it's doing something. Let's get back to that just a few seconds later, and let's just spin. So what you also saw is that we have 2 different resource groups. So we have specified one Bicep file, and that Bicep file uses 2 resource groups. We deploy the VNet in a VNet resource group, and we deploy the VMs in a predefined resource group as well. So what you can see here as well is that I just added the resource of the type resource groups to my Bicep file, and also set it to a scope subscription. So basically I'm using a subscription scope deployment. Oh, that's already coming in. You can also see that for the second resource group, we just named the resource group that we have as a parameter and just supply VNet to it. And then we also specify in the modules I have. So for example, this is the VM module, and you see that the scope is set to the app RG, meaning that it will go to this resource group. And my VNet will go to the app RG VNet, meaning that it will go to this resource group as well. And that you can see here is that I also have supplied a scoping on the top of my Bicep file, meaning that I will be scoping the current subscription I'm in at this moment. So you can see that the deployment has run. So let me just check the Azure environment as well. I should have 2 additional resource groups. So I have the Bicep 005 and I have the Bicep 005 VNet. You can see here is that I just have the VNet with my network security group attached to it for the subnet. You can also see that I have 1 deployment in here with my specified deployment name of VNet name, with of course also the specified things as well. And in the other resource group, the Bicep 005, I have 3 deployments. Basically what it does, for the modules, like I explained before, it creates nested deployment, in this example, 3 nested deployments, and just spins that off as well. Meaning that I will have 3 VMs here with all the public IP and network configuration completely attached to it and up and running at this moment. So really making it easier for you to just spin up a lot of resources and work with those resources as well. So that's basically also what I want to show with this demo is that it's really easy for you to just do a subscription scope deployment. I've seen a lot of people hammering around with, when they start with ARM, to do multiple resource group deployments in one ARM template, or just specifying 4 templates and just deploying template by template. By using those scoping and the target scope, it's really easy for you to just specify where you want to go. In this example, I want to go to a target scope subscription, and I just define a resource group and then deploy a storage account to a resource group as well. Really making it easy for you to just apply the correct scoping in your ARM template by just applying it directly in Bicep. What I also want to show you is that basically directly supplying my Bicep file to the new Azure Resource Group deployment. So for example, what you can see in 002 is just a simple Bicep file that uses a module So we have the storage account module. We supply it with a specific name, a location, of course, and a storage output. And what you can see in the deploy script is that if we go through the steps, we can construct a new resource group. So let me just off. So we have a resource group called Bicep 002. Damn it. Come on. Oh, there you are. Okay. It's just created, right? The interfaces. Some caching issues, I think.
I found the portal has been a good 30 or 40 seconds behind.
Yeah, it's been
deployments of late, so
yeah, I had it all week already. I was hoping that the demo would be a lot easier, but let's
just suggestion here. You may fire up the Cloud Shell and type there AZ group list. It will bring it there.
Oh, okay.
Cloud Shell would be much better. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just continue and see what it does, because it's there. So its provisioning state succeeded. So let's presume it's there, and then it will pop up later on, I think. So what you can see here is that we just use a new AZ resource group deployment. We do the template file, and we just supply it with the Bicep file. As you can see here as well, on the 002 folder, we do not have a JSON file yet ready there. So it's really using the Bicep file to do the deployment. We supply it, of course, with the location, because we need to supply resource group deployments with a location. And we have to supply, of course, the resource group name. So if we just run this script, you will see that it sometimes takes a little bit longer as well, because it just needs to construct the Bicep file. Azure isn't quick tonight. So it's really... Let me just, if I just speed. Oh, there it isn't as well. That's funny. Yeah, so you can see here that it's now deployed the template itself. You can see that the parameters supplied. You can see the resource itself and everything up and running. So basically making it really easy for you, not just to generate your Bicep file to JSON, no, just supplying the Bicep file, let the tooling work for you, and let the tooling generate the JSON files. What I've seen around is that when using the PowerShell version, you also have to install Bicep locally to make it work. So in the backend, the tooling is really using Bicep itself to generate the JSON file and then doing the deployment on the backend. Within Azure CLI, that's much different, because it just contains the Bicep installation package in itself. So we also want to do a decompile section. So what you can see here, I have a template in this folder, and this is basically a template I use for another presentation I normally do regarding you build it, you run it, where we just spin up a Kubernetes cluster, have Azure Front Door connect to it, having a SQL database connected to it as well. So really, it's already a very large ARM template that I would just construct it as well. And it's very easy to get this up and running into a Bicep file. So if we just do Bicep file, and then go to template.json, just press enter. Yeah, so you can also see here that for some reason I have a property in here that is not allowed on a specific object. So I'm specifying a firewall rule with a location property in ARM that isn't allowed. The ARM template works. I can assure you that, but for some reason it's not allowed. So that's also give you the warnings. And you can also see some other different warnings as well doing the Bicep generation. So really making sure that you have the correct bicep. If you just look at the bicep file, you can see the parameters, of course, with all the correct attributes as well that I have within ARM. And then all the resources specified. So we have a lot of resources in here. So we have a SQL Server resource, database, and also, of course, the outputs itself that are completely the same as the outputs I have defined in ARM. So if we look at the ARM template, for example, you just go to the outputs. You can see that we just use a concatenation in here to concatenate the resources. And you see the same thing happening in here as well. So what you can see here as well is that we, for example, if we want to output the instrumentation key, it still uses the reference method because the reference method is still available. And it's maybe even easier to just use the app insights resource. And the dot instrumentation key. It's much easier. But that is just because the way the outputs are set up within my own template, it generates what the process thinks is best, and then just the processing. So you still have to validate what you are doing to just use the correct methods, really making sure that everything works as you expect it to work. And this will basically generate the same thing on the backend as well. So that's basically regarding the decompilation. Let's just move back to the slides. And basically I have a slide now saying Bicep CI/CD. So basically what you can do as well, you can also incorporate Bicep, of course, within your CI/CD pipeline. There are already a lot of community efforts as well and tasks for example, Azure DevOps to use Bicep. But what I've done, I've just created a pipeline myself that uses the Bicep tooling. So basically this is tooling for a Windows agent. Basically what it does, it just uses the manual installation option for Bicep. So what you can see here is that basically, just the first task, just install Bicep. So really making sure that Bicep is available on your agent. The second part is just building your Bicep file. It's really using Bicep and constructing the Bicep file in your JSON. And then I have a script that checks if the resource group is already available or not. And then it just deploys a template spec. Because basically what this script does, it uses Bicep to generate an ARM template. And then we use the ARM template to generate a template spec. I'm not sure if everyone has heard in this meeting about template specs, but for example, template specs are really easy for end users to make resources based on a template. So I'm not sure. Let me just check if I still have it running. Okay, let me just get it in here as well. I need to leave this open as well. So let me just go to my project as well. Yep, sign out and log in with other user. Sign out of this one, and then go to this one and do this one. So basically I have a test project in here, Web App Insights, and that's basically the pipeline you saw. So it basically deploys the resource group as well. And let me just check if it already exists. So let me just run this one. Let me just run it. So it will construct the ARM template and deploy it to Azure, but I'm not sure why it's not showing my resource groups. Oh, I got it. This one is going to another subscription. I just have my subscription filter on. Let me just put it off. action I'm deploying to at this moment. So that's the piece 27. Oh, it should be this one. Resource group we are deploying in. Check resource group. Yeah, SP template specs. Yeah, there's 002. So that took a long time. That's where the storage account is deployed. And let me just leave that one running in the backend as well. That's basically now deploying a resource group as well with a template spec. But the difference there is that I just constructed the bicep file, and I'm using the bicep file as the template specification just to make it useful for me to just use bicep in generating template specs and not just only writing JSON files, because a template spec is based on a JSON file. So you have that part in Azure DevOps, and for example, you can also use GitHub. Just do your workflow actions. So I also have yeah, where is my action? That's not a different project. So let me just here. Yeah. So you can also run the bicep in GitHub Actions, and that's basically doing the same process as I just showed you on the Windows agent, but then on a Linux agent, it's basically exactly the same. Just install the bicep on the agent itself, run the bicep.build, and then you have the complete workflow. So that's basically, this is one of my own blogs I've written the last couple of weeks, me working with bicep, really making sure how you can work with bicep. What I also want to show you as well is that since a couple of days, Microsoft also updated the docs.microsoft.com, so you can find information about Bicep there as well. And they also built a Bicep playground that's basically hosted on Azure itself. So where you can see here is that on one hand you have the Bicep file, on the other hand you have the ERM template. But you, for example, can also do a decompile very easily in the web interface by just uploading a JSON template, making you not that you do not have to use the Bicep tool itself. No, it will do it for you. It's just what you think is handy, of course. I like working with the Bicep tool just directly in Visual Studio Code, really seeing what it does and what it generates for me. So let me just move over back to my slides. So basically a few resources for you that you can use to start learning Bicep. Basically, of course, the Azure Bicep GitHub repository. A lot of information is already in there. There are already a lot of examples as well. So if you want to get started for a specific resource, just try it yourself first. I think that's the best learning curve you can get. Just trying to create a VM, see what the interface gives you for the required properties and just specify them as well. The Docs Microsoft, that's basically a new page Microsoft created. There's basically a tutorial in there to just get started. You can look at my personal repository. So basically the files I've showed you today are in that repository as well. You can reuse them. And basically you can use the Bicep playground as well. Carl also mentioned it when we were just talking with the three of us, is that you also now have PSArm. That's basically the same thing as Bicep, but then just through PowerShell. That's basically an experimental language at this moment, and it basically does the exact same thing that Bicep does, just in another language. So check it out if you like Bicep. Maybe if you like writing PowerShell a script, this is the better option for you. But this one is still experimental. where Bicep is basically completely transparent and completely using the same functionalities that you can use in ARM. So thank you all for joining my session. So if you want to get in contact, you can reach me on LinkedIn, you can reach me on Twitter. Just showed you my personal website as well, where I post a lot of blogs as well. You can also send me an email or just look at my GitHub repository. Thank you, guys.
Excellent, Maik. Thank you very much for that. Has anybody any questions for Maik before we wrap up for the evening? Feel free to turn your camera and mic on or just type in the chat and I'll read them.